Hello, Reds fans, and welcome to another episode of We Love Our Team. Today, my partner Jack Greiner and I welcome perhaps the most revered television sports reporter in Cincinnati TV history, the one and only Dennis Janson. After a brief stint at WKRC Channel 12, Dennis joined WCPO Channel 9 in 1984 and continued as one of the primary sports figures on the station until his retirement from Channel 9 in 2013. Dennis's Rolodex was filled with everyone associated with Cincinnati sports and beyond, and he seemed to be in on all of the big stories in Cincinnati sports. For many fans, Dennis Janson is often referred to simply as DJ, and any longtime Cincinnati sports fan knows exactly who DJ is, much like when we say Pete as shorthand for Pete Rose. Welcome to We Love Our Team, Dennis Janson.
Thank you, Randy and Jack. That intro ran exactly 4 seconds longer than my last sportscast. I hope to live up to that acclamation. That's very, very kind of you. Thank you.
Well, Dennis, we like to start most episodes. We love having you on the show, and this is going to be pretty exciting for our listeners, I think. But the first thing we like to do before we really delve into things is start by learning about our guest Reds fandom. So could you tell us a little bit about how your Reds fandom began and evolved over the years?
My dad was a Reds fan, and he had a transistor radio that forever had dead batteries because I was listening to it under the covers at night, listening to Wade Hoyt and then John. Who else was on there? Frank McCormick, exactly. And inevitably, I would fall asleep with that thing on, and my dad would come in the morning and find his batteries dead. So, and plus, it was, of course, knot-hole baseball back in those days, and I played for a little team in East Price Hill called Our Lady of Grace, and they had knot-hole days on Saturdays. They played afternoon games, and if you showed up at Crosley Field in your uniform, you got in for free. It was great. It was wonderful.
Dennis, did you ever play for a guy named Frank Kelly? He was a coach over there.
Indeed, he was. The late Frank Kelly. In fact, his daughter, Lois, was my second grade teacher at Our Lady of Grace. And I have great fondness and love for the Kelly family. They just lost Jim Kelly a couple months ago. And what a wonderful family. And Mr. Kelly had such patience with we kids. And we were going in a million directions at once. And he just somehow herded the cats in one direction and got the job done and taught us baseball. It was wonderful.
Did you know Maureen or Renee Kelly?
Renee Kelly, I went to I was in class with Kathy Kelly.
Okay.
Renee, I don't believe so. Now, is that her married name? Was she a married Kelly?
Well, she was Maureen O'Connor. She married Bill O'Connor, who owned the Cincinnati Steam.
I remember Bill O'Connor. I didn't know his wife was a Kelly, though.
Yeah.
8 or 9 Kelly kids. And Mike Kelly became a sports writer for many years and was in Omaha, and I think he's back in town now. But what a great family, and what a great teacher early on in my baseball career. Excuse me. Pardon me.
So what position did you play, Dennis?
I played third base. I played right field, and I was a catcher.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
I evolved into catching later when I got to, we played after 8th grade. We got a little Muni team together, and I played with, Timmy Meyer, who went on to coach basketball at Xavier, and Ron Krechting, and Tom Schulte, and Jay Esselman, Joel Esselman. P.D. Ruhlman was on that team, and it was fun. It was fun. And then,
were the teams any good? Were they any good?
Yes, absolutely. No thanks to me. I was the donut before Mark Purdy was the donut. Yeah. And you know what? To this day, I think back to there are guys that are hit the ball to me guys. You know what I'm talking about? In a crucial situation in the game, they're like, hit the ball to me because I know I will make the play. Unfortunately, I was never really a hit the ball to me guy, except when I was catching. That was I was pretty good behind the plate.
Well, that's good.
Not much got past me. No.
So, yeah, you listened to, you had Wade Hoyt, and then I guess Jim McIntyre was
And
a
Ed
voice
Kennedy
for.
did games for a while, and then of course Jack Moran was on doing games, and yeah, but Wade Hoyt was the coin of the realm. In fact, I'm going to go pick up a book about him, Schoolboy, this morning that I bought last week and had to order it in. I'm really eager to get into that because I met Wade later on in life, and what a fantastic guy he was. And the stories, well, the stories speak for themselves. That was his stock in trade after he retired, and what a legend! It's unbelievable. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned borrowing your dad's transistor radio at night. Was he a ball player? Did he influence your baseball career at all?
Oh, sure. Yeah, he played baseball, and I think he went to high school with Herm Wiemeyer. And when I realized that there was a Major League Baseball player from Western Hills, and my dad actually knew him, I thought that was pretty terrific stuff. That was a connection to Major League Baseball that I didn't realize was there. And my dad was like, "Oh yeah, Herm Wiemeyer." And then after the fact, I found out that Eddie Brinkman and Russ and Ron Nixon, they of course were from Western Hills, and then later on, when I was at Elder High School, I can remember Pete Rose. His in-laws lived on Gilsey Avenue, adjacent to Elder Stadium, and Pete would come in the horseshoe end of the stadium, and he'd lean on the wall down there and watch Elder play on Friday nights periodically after the baseball season was over. It was pretty good stuff, yeah.
I wonder if he had any money on the games in retrospect now.
Oh, now, come on, Jack. Do we need...
Come on. Hey, Jack, come on.
I was working at Ben's department store at 8th and Central, the House of Bargains, now a full city block long, and I would hitchhike down there after school, and occasionally Pete would pick me up, and he'd drop me off at Dalton. He'd head left to go into Crosley Field, and I'd walk the rest of the way into Ben's, and I'd go in and say, "Pete picked me up," and people were like, "Just stop," Not. Yeah, it's true. He had a great colored, a burgundy colored Olds Toronado that I think he got from the Joseph boys at Columbia Oldsmobile. And Greg Cook was also driving a Columbia Olds Toronado back in those days. So I thought that was a pretty cool car because Greg Cook and Pete Rose drove them. It was what a life.
Well, our younger audience doesn't even know who Greg Cook was, probably. Dennis, he could have been one of the great NFL quarterbacks, but for that injury in 1968?
And 69, I believe it was, yeah. And
I think you're right.
I think, well, I know for a fact that Bill Cook, late of the Inquirer and the Post, is working on a book about Greg Cook. And it's going to be something because he has reached out to any number of people. Among those who got very, very emotional talking about Greg Cook was Mike Brown. And Mike Brown has a Greg Cook watercolor hanging in his office down at Paycor Stadium. Yeah. He talked to Bob Trump. He talked to Bob Janson. Bill does his work, and I'm really looking forward to that piece on Greg Cook, because it was what a story. What a story.
Greg Cook and Johnny Bench both had sons, my son Ben's age, and at a knothole baseball game one time they were playing. Ben was on Greg Cook's son John's team, and they were playing Bobby Bench's team, and both Johnny Bench and Greg Cook were there, and this would have been in, I don't know, the 90s, and I just thought to myself, this would have been such a big deal back in the late 60s if these two guys were at the same spot. This would have been huge. So Dennis, how did you get into sports broadcasting?
I signed a list in the guidance office at Elder High School my sophomore year 1966, they advertised over the PA system, anyone interested in a career in broadcasting should sign this list. I had no interest in broadcasting whatsoever. I considered it, I wanted to be an Air Force pilot. I thought about being a priest, thought about law enforcement, heavy equipment operator, anything but that. And I was trying to dodge a test, hoping we'd get a field trip that day. No such luck. The field trip was to WSAI radio after hours, and I walked in that radio station at 6:30 on a Tuesday night, I believe it was. Dusty Rhodes was on the air, flogging the hits, and I walked into that place, and there was such an energy and a vitality and literally an electricity to this atmosphere. I thought, this is something I want to do. I don't know what I can do relative to this, but I want to be around this. And so they were forming an Explorer Boy Scout troop as part of their public service commitment. And I caught on, answered the request line for 2 years for free. And just whatever they needed me to do, I did. In fact, I was there that day when Jim Scott signed his contract, and I drove him back downtown to the Omni Netherlands when he arrived in Cincinnati. So I've always had an attachment to Jim Scott, and I left WSAI in probably 1971 to go to WKRC to work in their newsroom. And I said, well, if you can get me on a little part-time deal down here as well at the TV station, I'd like to do that. And so I onboarded as a production assistant, running the teleprompter, etc. And then I was hired in 1973 as the entertainment editor. I was 23 hours short of my bachelor's degree at UC. And I thought, well, I'm going to college to get a job in television. Here's my chance. So I quit school for the princely sum of $75 a week, went everywhere for free, including drinking beer on Bourbon Street with Clint Eastwood, Hugh Hefner's West Coast mansion, sitting in the hot tub next to Larry Zonka. Where else? Met Lee Marvin in New York, John Voight. I interviewed John Voight. And then after about a year and a half of doing that, I was laid off because new news director came in and said he wanted a troubleshooter, and they hired Howard Ain out of Dayton. And so I left there, and I went to Dayton, worked at 2 radio stations and Channel 2 up there. I worked for Omar Williams, the dean of Dayton sports, so I guess I was the associate dean. This was after a guy named Len Berman had left Channel 2 to go to NBC. And after I left DTN, it had been WLWD, Channel 2, Dan Patrick followed me into the weekend chair at Channel 2. So that was a nice jumping off spot in Dayton. Then I left the business for 3 years and got back in 77. In the interim, I ran a bar in Mount Adams called Chapter 13. And the Beverly Hills Supper Club fire was happening. I watched it burn from the front porch of the bar. And the next morning, I got a call from Fred Wymore asking me if I remembered how to edit film. And I said, yeah, I think it's like riding a bike. So he said, okay, get over here. This is 7 in the morning. And on Memorial Day weekend, 77. And I edited the first 3 pieces of film that ABC aired on the network. And it just whetted my appetite to get back into the business and work under pressure. And that was the relaunch of my career. Started again at KRC. Fred became the sports director. I became the weekend sports anchor at Channel 12. Fred left. Then Ira Joe Fisher came. Nick Clooney came. And I left there in '84 after a wonderful collaboration. Yeah, we were the #1 rated ABC affiliate in the country during the Winter Olympic Games, February, for the Miracle on Ice. We were a juggernaut. And then an agent who was a friend of the general managers at WCPO, his name was Conrad Shadlin. He went about disassembling that #1 rated ABC affiliate because we finally knocked off Al Shonelcotty. And he got Nick a job at KNBC in Los Angeles. He got Ira a job at WCBS and WABC in New York. And I knew about an opening at Channel 9, so I went across the street And in the course of 364 days, 1 day short of a year, that number one rated team had been disassembled and scattered to the wind. And then I went to 9 and prospered there for the next 28 years.
Wow. That's
That's an
amazing.
incredible story. Hey, Dennis, can you talk a little bit about how different TV sports coverage was in the early days and how it changed over time with the advent of ESPN and cable news?
Well, let me just point out the technical changes and innovations, and those changes are most pronounced, I believe. I shot Jerry Springer's wedding. Okay. I was at Channel 12 working on a Saturday night as a production assistant, and I had a 16 millimeter Bell and Howell wind up black and white silent movie camera. And I had what you called a Frezzi light. It was just a portable light and had a battery pack. I went out to a little temple out on Springfield Pike, and I shot Jerry's wedding. Okay. He and Mickey got married. And you have to think that I went out to Springfield Pike, had to get back to the station. They had to take the film out of the camera in a dark room. They had to put it into a processor. They had to process the film. They had to take it out. They had to edit it. They had to put it on a projector. Best case scenario, once you hit the door, it took about 23 to 27 minutes to get a piece of film on the air. Now, as I mentioned in my retirement speech, now if I had a cell phone with me, I could literally carry the 40th renewal of their vows. I could carry it live around the world on a cell phone. That's a pretty big leap in technology alone. In terms of coverage itself, there were questions we didn't ask back in the old days. There were just saying some things that you didn't vocalize. You could think it, but it's just like, no, I'm not going to put this man or this woman on the spot. It's none of my business. It's too titillating. It's just too salacious. We're not going to go there. That was long before that adage was first coined. And you just had some gentility and civility about the process. That's gone. Lord knows that's long gone, isn't it?
That ship has sailed, that's for sure.
How about newspapers were so prominent back in those days? What was the competition between TV sports and like Enquirer or the Cincinnati Post sports section?
Years ago, when I was still working at WSAI in the newsroom there, Doug Anthony was my mentor there. He was the morning sports anchor. I would rewrite stories out of the Enquirer. I'd stop by there 5:30 on my way to UC. He would circle papers or stories in the newspaper. He'd say, call these people in here because they had a Rolodex and verify the facts and then write up a couple versions of that for me. And I said, Doug, it's 5:30 in the morning. Am I going to wake these people up? He said, listen, if they are consequential enough to be mentioned in the morning paper, they're up by 5:30. I thought was an interesting observation. And then I said, well, all the facts are here in the story. Why do I need to? He said, listen, here's something else in the newspaper. He opened up the inside the front page, and there was the corrections column. And he says, this is the stuff the newspaper got wrong yesterday, and we don't want to do that. So that was a very important lesson that I learned very early on, and that's why I never once had to offer a retraction or a correction in 45 years on the air. But the newspaper, if you could beat the newspaper on a story, that was the gold standard back then, and that's what we strived to do. And once I got to Channel 12 with Fred Wymore and then to Channel 9 with John Popovich, we would regularly break stories on the newspaper. And it just was a gleeful moment when you knew about the alarm bells that you had set off across town in the other newsrooms, let alone the newspaper. It was great stuff.
So what were some of the more memorable stories that you broke that you can think of?
Johnny Bench's retirement. I had that on the air 11 o'clock the night before they called the news conference. It had everyone gathered down at Riverfront Stadium, Dick Wagner presiding, and Johnny made he alluded to me, breaking the story and spoiling his surprise. We broke the story about Jerry Faust leaving Muller High School to go to Notre Dame. We broke the story about Johnny Pont coming out of retirement to coach at Mount St. Joe. Holy smokes, Johnny Pont. We had Chris Collinsworth signing a futures contract with the Tampa Bay Bandits of the United States Football League. We had the story about Bob Huggins not going to West Virginia. When that was, everyone was hot to trot on that. And I called Bob. I said, Bob, what's, he goes, I don't know where they got that. He said, I was with Brett Barrett last night at the NCAA Final Four. I think it was in Syracuse. And he says, Brett was drunk. And I think Bob probably had a few pops. And Brett was badgering him about going to West Virginia. He goes, yeah, sure, I'm going to West Virginia. So Brett Barrett contacted some people and they picked it up here and everybody ran with it. And my producers were hollering at me. They go, Channel 12 said he's going. I'm saying, he's not going anywhere. And they were the ones that had to offer the retraction. So I broke the story about the 2015 All-Star game coming to Cincinnati. And I got that through a friend whose girlfriend was with the catering company down at Great American Ballpark.
Wow.
Came through the kitchen. And then Brian Kelly going to Notre Dame, we broke that story. So those just some of the higher profile stories that we broke over the years. And it was just great. It was great. And
that's awesome.
And when you get a little note, handwritten note from, let me that's my brother calling. When you get
somebody else calling in with a story, Dennis, somebody else break a story.
When you get a handwritten note from Bill Burley, the CEO of EW Scripps, saying, well done, Denny, great job, let's talk soon and have coffee. I mean, that's pretty good stuff.
That's pretty good stuff.
And lower price.
Well, Dennis, our younger listeners don't even know what a Rolodex is.
Yeah.
But you mentioned the Rolodex with all of your sports connections. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about that, and do you still have it?
I still have my Rolodex, absolutely. Yeah, sure. A Rolodex was just a device that you put cards in and you could roll it over and you hopefully put them in an alphabetical order. And it's what a contact list is today on a cell phone or on a computer. It's just the list of contacts. And early on, Doug Anthony told me, he said, listen, there are worse things that you can do than buy a newspaper guy a beer, because they just had some kind of animus toward broadcast news people, especially TV people. So I would go down to the what was the bar down in the first floor on the Enquirer building, the Cricket. It was a guy named Leighton was the bartender in there, and I had my brother's draft card. He was 3 years older than me, so I'm 18 years old, 19 years old, down at the Cricket, hanging out with Bill Ford and Jim Montgomery and Cy Burek was in Dayton. What am I talking about? Jim Montgomery, Jim Shuttlecotty. They'd all stop in there and because they had that Bulldog edition. They'd get it out an early edition about 7:30 or 8 p.m. They'd go downstairs and have a lid lifter, and then they'd go up and put the morning edition together. And I'd buy these guys a beer, and they remembered me. It was great. Bob Hertzl would be in there after the Reds game, and nobody was better than Hertz covering a Reds game. Oh my gosh, there were no wasted effort with Bob Hertzl. And when he started killing Dick Wagner prevailed and had Bob Hertzl taken off the Reds beat and moved to the suburban desk. I mean, what a travesty that was.
Is that right? I did not realize that.
Yeah, he was criticizing Dick Wagner and his moves. And Wags, I'm trying to think, it was not Frank Dale might have been gone by then, but was it the Williams or who owned the Enquirer at that time? Could have been Frank Dale was the publisher, and he had Hertz taken off off the Reds beat, which was one of the publishing travesties of our time. So
yeah.
Wow.
Let's get back to the young Dennis Janson growing up in Price Hill. So, who are your favorite Reds players as a kid?
I love Pete. I knew that Jim Brosnan was from Cincinnati, so I loved Jim Brosnan. Again, Herm Wiemeyer, he was pretty cool. And then people think that baseball players now dismiss fans seeking autographs, and that's a new iteration. Those guys, Ted Kluszewski, Bob Perkey, Wally Post, Gus Bell, they used to drive past us on Saturday afternoons out of that players' lot down at Crosley Field. They would bolt by in their Cadillacs and their Oldsmobiles. Our little hats would spin. They'd go by so fast. They ignored us back then too. So yeah,
Nothing new.
yeah, and it was neat. It was a great time. It was a great time. And my dad would occasionally get tickets. We'd go down to Crosley Field, and he would never pay to park because my dad was very frugal, and we would park up by Union Terminal, and we'd walk into Crosley Field, and that felt like such a slog. I thought it was, it was like, I thought I was walking to Dayton. It so, but once that stadium came in sight, it was like, wow, this was worth it. This was worth it. Yeah, it was great.
Yeah.
And walk in and see that green grass, holy smokes, it's unbelievable. Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah.
Dennis, one of my favorites at Channel 9, other than you, was John Popovich.
He's the best. You know what? When I came over from Channel 12, they said, "Well, now do you want to be sports director?" I said, "No, I do not want to be sports director." John Popovich is very organized. He's very orderly. He's very precise. I knew that I wasn't. I was sort of haphazard and scatterbrained. And I said, no, let John stay in that role, and I will do what I do best, which is writing, reaching out to contacts, reporting, and anchoring. And it was a wonderful collaboration, 28, almost 29 years. And during that time, we had two disagreements. I think that's unprecedented in broadcasting.
Yeah, he's a wonderful guy. Now, after you left in 2013, did you continue working in any capacity?
Well, it was December of 2012. I took Rich Bainey, who by that time was the CEO of Scripps, and I took him to lunch, or he took me to lunch at the Boathouse. And I said, "Listen, Rich, my contract was up in May of 2023, and I said I want to come off the air. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm tired of working nights, and I just didn't care to do it anymore. And the business was evolving, and I had taken $100,000 a year pay cut with my last contract because the downturn in the economy. And it wasn't that so much as when they took our intern program away, we managed to screw up free labor at Channel 9. Okay. I used to love our interns, and some of our interns are still populating broadcast entities across the country today. Excuse me. So I told Rich, I said, listen, I went out, I went off. I'd like to work for the website for a couple of years, see if I can do that. And I wanted to do a commentary once a week on the air. So he said, that's great. He says, we don't often have many people that don't want a 6-figure job. I said, well, I'm the one, because I was still making good bread. And, but I came off the air May 23rd of 2013 and did 3 columns a week for the website and did an on-air commentary once a week. And then after 2 years of that, the news director started screwing with my copy on my commentaries. And she says, well, we don't say things like that here at Channel 9. I say, well, that's because you're not saying them. I'm saying them. And nothing inflammatory or profane. It just was pointed. And I really enjoyed that. I had started that back in 2002. And I did commentaries 3 nights a week at 11 o'clock. And the second quarter hour of those nights, the viewership was up 22%. So people responded to them. And then management lost their nerve because I got a little edgy at times. And then I got married. And when I came back from my honeymoon, they said, why don't we put this on hiatus for us? I said, okay, yeah, right, sure. Never came back until I resurrected them in 2013. And again, they got response. People wanted to hear what I had to say, strangely.
They were good. I remember them. I enjoyed those as well. So it's too bad. Hey, do you follow the Reds now?
Not like I used to. I mean, it used to be my profession. Now it's my,
Yeah.
it was my calling, and now it's a side hustle. Yeah, I watch them. I listen to them. Um, I didn't think that anybody could replace Marty Brennaman, but Tommy Thrall he has really just made a sort of a seamless transition into that very, very big seat down there at Great American Ballpark. I enjoy listening to Tommy Thrall, and the TV guys. I wish that they would take a page out of Vin Scully's book, and we do have pictures. We can see what's happening. Need someone to dissect every pitch.
Yeah, I remember reading or seeing something that when Al Michaels, although that was on radio, I mean that was his radio call though. I think when he called Bench's home run against Dave Justy in the '72 playoffs, I think he just went quiet and just allowed the crowd. The radio just had all you heard was the crowd for seconds. Which is a long time on the radio, obviously.
Watching a game with Johnny Bench is just he rails at these guys. Shut up! Shut up! I can see. I've got a 60-inch TV. I don't need you. He goes crazy. But it's tough. It's tough calling a game, and I did color commentary on Bengals games for 2 seasons with Phil Samp. It's not an easy job, being a color commentator. But some people do it better than others. Let's just put it that way. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Hey, Dennis,
I remember what was it? What Joe Morgan and what was his John the former.
I know exactly who you're talking about, and I can't. John, doggone it, I can't think of his name. But they were.
Yeah, they were.
From San Francisco.
Yeah.
Oh, that's terrible.
It'll come up. Yeah. These 3 great minds, we can't come up with John. I want to say John Allen, but he was a former Reds GM, so it'll come. Right. It'll come back to us. Yeah.
He's one of Marty's favorite guys.
Wasn't it John Miller?
John Miller.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, hey, Dennis, let's ask you some questions that every Reds fan wants to know Dennis's opinion on. Okay?
Uh-huh.
First of all, should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame?
No.
Go.
He will be in the Hall of Fame eventually. Yeah. Sadly, after he dies. And to baseball's eternal discredit, they changed the rules after the fact. And I think in some fashion or form that the Hall of Fame is not comprehensive unless Pete is in it. But Pete knew the rules. He knew that it was a potential disqualifier. Pete has a sickness. It is an absolute illness that I witnessed firsthand, and we all turned a blind eye to it. But no, I don't think so. Have you read Keith O'Brien's new book on Pete?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had coffee with Keith O'Brien on Friday, and we talked about this at length. And yeah, he's the St. X boy, I guess. So, as are you? Yeah.
As is Randy. There's been so much written about Pete, but I thought Keith did a great job of unearthing some things that maybe we didn't know, and just sort of taking a different angle of it. And it's interesting because you obviously knew Pete, and you say you all turned a blind eye to it. Was it just the volume of betting that you were seeing him doing, or just his sort of obsession with it? What do you think in retrospect?
Here's a story that I witnessed personally. It was the Reds' last year training in Plant City. Okay, Pete's the manager. It's the opening or second night, I can't recall, of March Madness, the NCAA basketball tournament. I'm on the phone in the clubhouse. This is before cell phones, and I'm talking to the TV station. And Mark Stowe, his older brother, is the clubhouse attendant. He comes in, and he's got a legal pad, and he says, DJ, you're going to be on the phone much longer? I said, no, I'm just, give me 15 seconds here. I give them a time and an out cue. And I said, what do you got? He says, I got to call in Pete's bets. I said, oh, really? And I hung up and I said, "What's he got there?" And he had the sheet of basketball games for that night at the tournament. And I said, "What's he got there?" He said, "He's got 20 games." I said, What is he betting per game?" He says, 2,000.
Wow.
$40,000 he's rolling on the opening night or the second night, the most volatile nights of the college basketball tournament, and he's rolling 40 large at this. Okay, and letting a clubhouse kid call this into some bookie somewhere. And I thought, holy smokes, that's when I realized that, because prior to that, people would ask Pete about his bet. He said, "Well, I make more than most people, so I can afford to bet more." And it was like, wow. And
Wow.
That's not good.
no, not good, not good. And
What's your
Mario Soto told me one time, he says, "I don't trust Pete. Pete's a gambler." And I said, what do you mean? He says, look at it. He says, he never bets on the Reds when I'm pitching because they don't score runs for me. And darn if it wasn't true. They didn't score many runs for Mario Soto, did they?
No, they didn't. Wow.
what's your favorite all-time Reds team, Dennis?
90, the 90 team. Yep. And a lot of that was facilitated by the fact that we onboarded Ken Griffey Sr. after the Mariners season was over, and they let him go. And we onboarded him as our analyst, okay? So I went everywhere, Pittsburgh and then Oakland with Senior. And whereas the other stations and outlets, they were dying to get interviews with people, players were screaming at Senior, "Hey, Senior, when you need me, holler, I'll be there." And they would volunteer to be on our show because Senior was there. They weren't there for me. They were there for the old man. It was great. It was like taking candy from babies. It was.
I remember when they had to cut Senior that year, and they really did have to do it. I think there was I can't remember the roster move, but they whether they made a trade or it was something that I think from a pure baseball perspective it made sense, but I think that it was a tough day. I remember Nuxall just being really upset on the radio.
He went to Seattle, and it wasn't on that occasion that he and Junior hit back-to-back home runs at the end of that season.
Right.
Absolutely. How about your favorite moment as a Reds fan?
I think it came when Jay Bruce doused me with champagne after what year was that? 20. Yeah, his home run was that
2010. That was 2010.
2010.
And I was just soaked. And those guys couldn't get me wet enough. And champagne stings your eyes. I don't know whether you realize it.
Right. They all wear goggles now. They're the players. It's hilarious. They put on goggles.
They wear goggles. To have that moment live and captured on video and a lot of people's memory, that was pretty cool. Yeah.
That's fun.
And then taking batting practice from Tom Seaver over at Eden Park with the Equitable Old Timers back in, I think that was 88, that All-Star game. That was pretty cool. Wow. And I have a picture of Tom Seaver showing me the baseball. I took his first pitch, which was right down the heart of the plate. And he hollered at me. He says, What are you looking for? And I says, "My old man told me to always take one to see what he's got." All time when he walked in, I have a picture of him showing. He said, "This is a baseball." He says, "This is the closest you're going to seeing this baseball for the rest of this at bat."
Hey, Jack. Jack, we're running out of time. Let's go to the lightning round with some questions.
Okay, sorry.
What do you think a small team like the Reds can win?
Absolutely. Yes, they can.
Okay.
If they play hard, if they play small ball, if they hit behind the runner, if they take the extra base, if they don't get too aggressive, and don't make the first or the last out at third base, that is boneheaded. It holds up today as it did back in 1865 or 75 or whenever the Reds started. I would not sign anyone to a contract over 5 years. Giving Joey Votto a 10-year contract hamstrung this team for the last 6 years he was here. Yeah. Stupid. That was a dumb move. And Homer Bailey giving him that deal, another bad move. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, those were some bad decisions, no doubt. But Randy, you got some word association for DJ?
Oh, how about DJ? Let's go with 1975 Reds.
Yeah, I watched it from afar. I was out of the business. I was not associated with broadcasting in any fashion or form. I watched. I think I watched one of the games in cahoots up in Clifton. I was sitting at the counter there watching it on TV, and I thought, you know what? I wish I had applied myself more when I had the opportunity to be in broadcasting, because I might be there today. So that was my enduring memory of 75. That and Carlton Fisk waving that home run fair. That was, yeah.
How about the first word that comes to mind when I say Marge shot?
Landlord. I
How
rented.
about Bob?
I rented a house from Marge on her property, 23 years ago. I lived
How
next.
about
I lived to Dick and Joyce Farmer from Cintas. They were my next door neighbors. Dirk Yager was down the lane from me. I lived on Fox Cub Lane. It was pretty Tony address back in those days.
Yeah, really. That's a long way from Price Hill, man. I'll tell you what.
Bob Castellini?
Wonderful.
Ellie De La Cruz?
Impetuous.
Oh, that's a great one. That's a great word. I like that. I like that one.
Raiders?
Take a pass. I'm a UDF man.
Oh, my goodness.
And finally, Dennis Janson,
Yes.
did you ever sell women's shoes?
Absolutely. I sold a lot of women's shoes. Baker's, Chandler's, and Ben's department store. Yes, sir.
Well, hey, Dennis, we really enjoyed this. That's a great note to end this episode on. And we appreciate your time. We appreciate your sports reporting over the years. You're absolutely the best TV sports reporter ever.
That's very flattering of you. I hope I lived up to that billing, but I had my shortcomings, trust me. But I tried and I cared. Yep.
Absolutely. That's all that matters, man. That's all that matters at the end of the day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, man.
Randy, you have a wonderful day.
Take care, buddy.
Hey, Dennis, we're going to allow the studio audience to give it up one more time. Unbelievable. Another standing ovation for one Dennis Janson.
And the lady, 1, 2, 8, how they scream, how they scream, how they scream.